Good evening, everybody. Welcome to TED Talks Ball. Super excited. It's a rare chance that I get evening shows, but when I have an outstanding opportunity to talk to somebody like Rohan Chakravarthi, then sometimes my wife will pitch in and relieve me of my daddy duty to take care of our 3-year-old son. So I can talk to all stars like Rohan here. So Rohan, thanks for joining. You guys may know him at Rohan Chakrav on Twitter, and then also Rohan Chakravarthi on, the Rohan Chakravarthi Show on YouTube. I've got the link in the description. But we're also simulcasting to his channel, so we may have folks in both channels. I'll do my best to show all the chats from both so that nobody has to feel like they're missing out by being in the other channel. And if you're watching on my channel, make sure you go like and subscribe to Rohan. And I would ask the folks watching in Rohan's channel to do the same for me and TED Talks Ball. That way we all thrive and do well. So Rohan, thanks for joining. And anything I may have missed, anything that you want to add?
Appreciate you for having me on. Glad we could get a time fixed, obviously, this week, earlier when you reached out. And excited to talk ball. Like you said, if you're on his channel, would appreciate if you come over to mine, give me some love. Same, if you're on my channel watching, make sure you go give Ted some love. And let's get this show rolling.
There we go. There we go. So we got some early chat folks here who came in before Jimmy Perez was in at noon saying, "What's up, guys?" Thanks, Jimmy, for joining. We appreciate it. And then had a couple of haters show up too. I'm not going to flash their stuff because it was, not true and unflattering. But they say that you haven't made it in this game until you've got some haters. And so I've got a couple, and they've popped into a few of my shows. So just enjoying. I'd say thanks for watching, guys. It's really awesome to have you. Even if you don't like what I do, you're supporting me by watching either way. So thanks a lot for the views. It's much appreciated. So Rohan, obviously off season, you would think there'd be nothing to talk about, but always in Ninerland, there's lots of things. It's been a while since you and I talked, so I don't even know if we've talked about draft stuff since the last time we got together. So that's something we could talk about too if we get time. But I think there's a lot of stuff going on. NFLPA just ranked Purdy the number one returning veteran, returning veteran, rising young returning veteran, whatever the terminology is, ahead of Garrett Wilson and Tony Pollard and some of the other really hot sort of not so much rookies anymore, but also maybe under 25 is the cutoff for that. I'm not sure. But I was going to get your thoughts on what you thought about that NFLPA, or if you'd seen that, if you're aware of it.
I have not. So if you don't mind, you mind sharing me just like maybe the top 5 or something like that?
Yeah, ultimately it was like Purdy was number 1. Pollard, I think, was 3. Garrett Wilson, I think, was 2. And there were a few other folks in there. I'm trying to just scroll down and pick up where I should have sent you this stuff before the show, so my apologies on that. But ultimately, it was here we go. Patrick Surtain was another one in that top 5 grouping. So Surtain, Garrett Wilson, Tony Pollard, and Purdy were some. Apparently, a lot of it is really just as simple as jersey sales. That they've all had explosive jersey sales, and so the NFL equates that to a rising star, which I think there is some correlation to jersey sales, and at least some popularity with young players.
If we're talking about jersey sales specifically, I can understand it. The 4 players you name, well, the 3 players alongside Purdy, all 3 of them are very good at what they do. Garrett Wilson, obviously the offensive rookie of the year last year. He's a dynamic player, and he plays for the New York Jets, which obviously has seen a lot of excitement the last few years. Patrick Surtain's a top young corner, a guy who I was high on coming out of that draft class, I believe in what was it, 2022. And then you talk about Tony Pollard, plays for Dallas, obviously a big fan base there, and an exciting player for Dallas. And then obviously Purdy plays for a huge fan base in the 49ers, and he's a quarterback. If you're talking about the top returners, I think all four players are better than Purdy. But obviously, if you factor in what I'm assuming they factor in terms of positional value, then I think you can definitely make the argument that the quarterback is the most valuable position in the NFL. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't have too many necessarily disparaging thoughts. I think it's understandable given the jersey sales, and also if you talk about the rest of, that group itself, I mean, it's a good group to be about among. So yeah, that's what I got to say.
No, no doubt. I wonder how far out of those top four someone like Sauce Gardner would be, because I know he was a pretty popular player, and a lot of people are putting him up there as like, I don't know. Am I seeing people saying he's the number one corner in the league now all of a sudden? I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm seeing stuff like not just the number one young guy, but just number one overall or number one in the AFC, or I don't know. It seems like he's getting a lot of, and well deserved. I mean, he's a great corner, no doubt about it. But I don't know if he's number one in the AFC or number one overall or anything like that. Uh,
I'm
but
surprised
go ahead,
though
I'll
that
let you
he's
go.
not on that list because he was an All Pro in his rookie year.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Real quick, just want to call out Fernando Fornares throwback in the house. We got Ramilia Sports Report. He's a Rams fan, a little bit of a troll, so he likes to troll us about 94 being our last championship, coming up on 29 years since our last Super Bowl. But, welcome to all viewers, as long as you behave. We're happy to have you. And I always just say to the Rams fans, if it's been so long, how come you guys only have half? And really, if you're saying you have 2 out of 5 that we have, you're probably lying anyway, because you probably weren't a St. Louis Rams fan anyhow. Because we all know there aren't many crossovers between St. Louis Rams and LA Rams anyway. Mariah Faithfully in the house saying yo, yo, yo. Welcome, Mariah. Everybody make sure you check out her channel. She and Taryn Lewis do great work over there. They always have fun giveaways, lots of good cards, and good swag that they give away to their listeners for free. We've got Edward Ascoli in the house. Say, hey, Niner Bros. Thanks, Edward, for joining. We appreciate it. Jim Everett the Great in the house said Kyle controlled his QBs with a PS5 controller. I think we saw a little bit of that more with. Looks like we lost Rohan here for a minute, but I'm sure he'll be back. I think we saw more of that actually with Sean McVay and Jared Goff. That McVay,
The most boneheaded thing possible. I was clearing
yeah.
tabs on the computer and I just X'd out the tab.
I'm surprised I have never done that myself, especially when you get a lot of
First
tabs
time.
and they start getting really small and there's like barely any difference between the X and the rest of the tab. Like, I'm surprised it hasn't happened to me. I'll just say that. And no worries, man. I knew you'd be right back. And I was just reading Jim Everett the Great's thing. He said Kyle controlled his QBs with a PS5 controller. And I said, actually, that was kind of more McVay with Jared Goff, where he would be in there talking to him right up to the 15-second cutoff. And finally, defensive coordinators started to figure that out, and they would basically wait to do their shift until McVay was out of Goff's ear, and then Goff couldn't do anything, and he was highly ineffective at dealing with defensive shifts that without McVay being able to guide him through, tell him exactly what to do, right? I mean, I think that's a little bit of projection by a Rams fan onto us. See what else we got here. This chat's really starting to pick up here. So we got Spider Niner in the house saying howdy. Welcome, Spider Niner. Thanks for joining. We got Patabo Hammer. Rohan, one of the greatest. Absolutely. I always say great guests make for good shows. Like my guests carry me the way our run game, Kyle, and our weapons and defense carry Jimmy G. So that's the key, is to have great guests. It makes these shows so much better. Also, great audience. Great audience makes for really unique and interesting shows. So I credit my guests and my audience for any success that I've had. Ramilia Sports Report says Rams have 4, Ted. Now, we don't count the 2, when there was like 12 teams playing in leather helmets. Winning an NFC Championship game over 16 teams now is more impressive than those 12-team or 8-team championships. Those are not even Super Bowls. We're talking Super Bowls, bro. Super Bowls. Keep with the combo. And then Edward Scully says, I like Purdy better, but it's too early yet. Do you have a favorite, Ron? Are you? I mean, I think most of us like both Lance and Purdy, but like, do you have a slight preference for one, or like a big preference for one?
Nah, I don't have preferences. I don't really, if we're being totally honest, don't really care who starts. Um, 49ers are the ones who see each quarterback the most. I think that Kyle Shanahan is just going to be just going to take the guy who he believes is the most ready, and that's where there's a lot of speculation coming out about, Brock Purdy. I'm sure we get it. We get into it, right? But yeah, I don't really care. Whoever starts, that's who they believe is the best option for their offense. And I mean, that offense has been prolific with whoever they believe can lead them there, regardless of what that quarterback play has been like. So I don't really care. I think either quarterback is going to lead the 49ers at least to the playoffs, if not more.
Absolutely. I really like Purdy a lot. And I just kind of like the idea of what I think Lance could be better if he could hit that ceiling. But like, there's no guarantees that Lance will hit that. And Purdy's definitely showed more so far. I'd just say that Purdy's had more at his disposal with CMC, because Lance had no CMC and barely had Kittle. But, people point out that Purdy was missing Debo for part of that run that he had. So, Purdy did a damn good job. I just don't go off QB wins exclusively. Larry Krueger really is big on saying, like, let's forgive Darnold for his QB losses. And I'm like, great. I agree. Darnold could do better here than he's done anywhere else. I think that's pretty probable, actually. But at the same time, if we're going to forgive Darnold for QB losses, then we can't really crown Purdy just for QB wins. Now, there's other things Purdy's done really well, and that maybe we can crown him for. And I think we'll get to that here. I was just kind of waiting for things to ramp up, but we're starting to get there. Real quick, just want to say Chris Hansen in the house. That's from To Catch a Predator. So it's a fake account, but he says Rams have 2, not 4. He's agreeing with that. Jim with the Great says Rams have 3. Patriots stole 1. Spygate. So we got some tinfoil hat conspiracy stuff going on here. I'm definitely a tinfoil hat guy. I always look for things that might be going on behind the scenes, but ultimately, at the end of the day, Rams have 2 Super Bowl wins, and anything else is just sort of crying, if you ask me. Rohan, so we both like both QBs. Awesome. You've probably seen, the Alex Rollins video where he came out and he basically said that Purdy and Jimmy were the same QB essentially. I'm willing to say similar, but I was kind of saying I think Purdy's better, just in an absolute sense. And then he has 2 things really going for him beyond that, in that he's younger and he's cheaper. I mean, ridiculously cheaper, 24 times cheaper. But what did you think of that Alex Rollins video and all this conversation going around in Ninerland?
I'll be totally honest. I did not watch the video, but I've seen the chatter about it, and I have a good idea of what that video is talking about. Essentially, in a way, comparing Jimmy Garoppolo and Brock Purdy's game, the title of our video today. And so, to me, here's what I think that I won't go as far as saying that they're the same person, but I also understand the premise of the video isn't saying they're the exact same person, but rather operate under similar pretenses and have similar play styles. I think there are some differences between the two. I think Purdy is a better improviser than Jimmy Garoppolo. And I mean, obviously, you can talk about knickknacks, right? Garoppolo has a quicker release. That's 100% sure. You can debate arm strength if you want. You can debate, obviously, I think Purdy has a little bit more of a willingness to throw downfield. But I think the premise of the argument is that both quarterbacks thrive in the short and intermediate game, while also, they don't have the strongest arms, which limits their downfield capacity and also limits throws that sometimes are early reads in the Shanahan offense where you got to just let it rip because of their unwillingness to sometimes let it rip. You can talk about turnover rates and different things like that. Obviously, Garoppolo had a pretty the one really main thing about Garoppolo last year, his turnover rate was really low, and his turnover worthy play rate was also pretty damn low. That was why the 49ers offense was pretty damn efficient before, during that stretch. Christian McCaffrey obviously played a huge role into it. We'll get to him later. Purdy, I'd say, was a little more turnover worthy prone. You look at his turnover worthy play rate, it was pretty high in comparison to Garoppolo's last year. So you talk about the different, there are differences in it. But I think the biggest question that surrounds that video and that you get out of that video is, we know what Jimmy Garoppolo is in the NFL, and his ceiling is capped at around, the middle of the pack for the quarterback rankings. I think that that is something that people can say for certainty, that right now his ceiling is capped at that, somewhat in that middle range. You could point to different things. Obviously, his veteranship, his injury history, his limited athleticism in comparison to before, and things like that. But the question is, can Brock Purdy have a higher ceiling than what Jimmy Garoppolo has, and like a significantly higher ceiling to where he can catapult himself into the top 10 of quarterbacks? Because really, in today's world, that's kind of what you need. That's kind of what you need. And I see a comment real quick about
Yeah.
Purdy's touchdown and interception ratio. It was 3.25. I'm not talking about turnovers. It's turnover worthy plays. It's plays that didn't necessarily land in a turnover, but were so turnover worthy plays. And I can't say the number right off the top of my head, but it was pretty high in comparison to what Jimmy Garoppolo had last year. That was my point, not the exact turnovers itself, though it was just the turnover worthy play rate. Because, yeah, if we're being honest, he did get lucky with a couple of dropped interceptions and a couple of, inadvertent passes here and there. But that's my question that I'll kick back to you, Ted, is, what do you think Brock Purdy's ceiling is? And can it be in that top 10 of quarterback range? Because that's what the 49ers are hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, I think statistically he's already in there, but like if you're asking, are there 10 quarterbacks in the league that could do it better in our system? I think there are now. But I think he's close to it already. I think I've heard a lot of people say 15 to 12 range, and I like that for him. I mean, I'm never going to put him on a single number because, it's just an opinion and it's so hard to compare, especially like I said, when all these QBs have different weapons and different coaches and different O lines, different run games. But, you try to, you know, gauge it all. So yeah, I mean, I think he's already close to top 10. So yeah, someone was saying we don't know what either. Steve Supremo in the house, he said we don't know what either ceiling is. LOL. And I think he means we don't know where they'll cap out, and that's true. I don't think Purdy has peaked. I'm virtually certain that Lance hasn't. But I don't think Purdy has a huge amount more to go. I think Purdy, let's say one way Purdy could really increase his ceiling is if during this rehab period he increases his arm strength. Because for me, I see him as limited in three ways: limited arm strength, limited height, and limited top speed. And I just don't think he's going to grow or get faster. He is really quick, and people always beat me up because they say, well, top speed isn't even as important as quickness. I'm like, you're right. Quickness to me is more important than top speed. But ultimately, and none of these things is a deal breaker by itself. Limited arm strength, there's plenty of great QBs with limited arm strength, plenty that were limited in height, plenty that were limited in top speed. But when you factor them all three together, that's when it starts to be like, oh, I think that could be, that could, again, I don't think it would keep him from being great, but it would make it a lot tougher to be great. I would bet, I'd want higher odds to bet on it, I guess you could say. So, I think Purdy can improve. I think he can, even if he doesn't improve his arm strength, which could happen here, he can improve his synchronization with the weapons. Like, for instance, in the NFC Championship game, when he got injured, I believe if it was Debo or Jennings was open, and if he just hit him on the break, Hassan Ridgeway would never gotten to him. Also, if he had stepped up in the pocket, so if he learns to be a little bit better pocket presence, not bail out back left all the time. There's definitely ways that Purdy can improve. I could see him being top 10. Yeah, maybe even top 8, 7, somewhere in there if everything breaks right for him. I just don't see him ever being like top 5. I don't ever see him being like a Mahomes or a Burrow or a Herbert or Aaron Rodgers or these guys who can really carry a team by themselves. We've got a lot going on. We had, especially last year, we had the number one D. I felt like we had the best group of weapons. We had a really solid O line, and we got Kyle. And that's the one thing that the video from Alex Rollins showed was that Jimmy or Purdy guys are running wide open all the time, and all the QB has to do is hit them. And yeah, Jimmy is better early. He's better at the first reads. He's got a little bit stronger arm. Purdy's much better at the improvisation, the hitting of the later reads, the going through the progressions. He's much more able to avoid pass rush and do things late in I would say play clock, but that's the wrong way to say it. But the late in the play, the actual play itself. So I think there's a lot of similarities, but ultimately, I think Purdy's just at least a little bit better overall. And then that's not even counting the fact that he's way younger and way cheaper. So then I think there's a lot more reason to believe that Purdy can improve than Jimmy G. And I think we've all seen the best of what Jimmy G can do.
I'll agree that, I think he can definitely improve over Jimmy G. And whether you say Purdy is already better than Jimmy G or whether he was better than Jimmy G last year, whatever your argument may be, I believe there's still room for growth. Now, obviously, the question is how much growth, but I think that there are things within the quarterback position that Purdy can improve on where it's not necessarily dedicated to his arm strength or things like, the unimprovable things. You mentioned my biggest gripe with Brock Purdy was his pocket presence. I thought his pocket presence wasn't great in 2022. He flushed out, like you said, to that left side a lot when pressure came. He flushed out too early, and that didn't allow the reads in the Shanahan offense to progress, and you weren't able to, you essentially bailed on open reads at times. That's the main thing that I want Purdy to obviously improve on. That and also the willingness to let it rip in between the second and third levels of the defense on some of those intermediate routes. He improved on that later in the season, but I think there is room for improvement. And yeah, Purdy's ceiling might be capped in general due to, not necessarily the lack of arm strength, which means you can't throw as deep as you might want all the time, unless obviously the ball, the player's open, wide open enough. And so I think that overall, to me, like there is room for improvement. And if the 49ers have a top 10 quarterback, I think they win a Super Bowl. And some people may debate that, understanding how valuable the position is in today's NFL. But I think if they have a top 10 quarterback, they've got a chance, a really good chance to win a Super Bowl. And I think they still do, despite the uncertainty with their quarterback position. You talk about Trey Lance as well. Trey Lance is the unknown commodity. And his potential, a lot of people believe he could be one of the top quarterbacks in the league if he gets it together, right? Because he's got the arm strength, he's got the athleticism, he's got good pocket presence as well. And so he's got like a certain mold of the traits. But the biggest traits for Trey Lance that he's got to improve on is the accuracy. And you can have the entire package, but if you don't have the accuracy, that automatically thwarts you as a quarterback and really hinders your ability to be a top 15 quarterback in the NFL. And so Lance, the way for him to really progress in the NFL is for that floor to really start matching some of that potential. Because if it's just potential the entire time, it doesn't really count for anything because you're not reaching the potential. It's there, but you're not reaching it unless that accuracy starts to get better. And that's been an issue with Lance the entirety of his short career. Obviously, not too much opportunity thus far for Trey Lance, but I think that that's something that you've got to mention as well. And right now with the 49ers, if we're being honest, the ceiling does not matter for either quarterback. The ceiling really doesn't matter. It's how well can they play. Well, it somewhat does. How well do the 49ers believe that either quarterback can play through this entire season to where when they reach that playoff time, which quarterback can provide them the biggest boost to win a Super Bowl? That's the way that I look at it. And so it's a mixture of floor and ceiling because you obviously have room to improve throughout the season, but they also want the guy who's ready to play. And that's the biggest question that's got to be answered as the beginning of the season comes around.
No doubt about it. And you mentioned turnover worthy plays, and that was one thing that Alex Rollins highlighted for Purdy was that he had quite a few interceptions dropped. And so while he has a very good TD to interception ratio, that Terradome was putting up their 3.25 TDs to every INT could have been quite a bit higher if a few people had not dropped, including like very notable one would be Stephon Diggs in the divisional round against the Cowboys, where the ball was tipped near the line of scrimmage, and Diggs, it went right into his breadbasket. But luckily, I think because it was tipped, it threw off his timing, and he just dropped it. But there were quite a few dropped interceptions, and Jimmy was guilty of that a lot earlier in his career. Like you said, it sounded like this season Jimmy got that down a little bit to where there weren't so many. I remember I beat him up about that. There were at least 2 games this season. I remember when Jimmy played with CMC. I think it was the Chargers and maybe the Cards. And I was like, hey, Jimmy didn't throw any balls to the defense in either of those games. And I was like, I got to give him credit, because like it was always like he would have an interception or 2 every game. Plus there'd be 1 or 2 dropped, by a linebacker or a safety lurking underneath seemed to always be his weakness over the middle. Steve says, if pressure's coming from the right, is he supposed to roll right? And I think you're supposed to step up in that case. Step up into the pocket, let the tackle push the end, around to the left, and throw the ball quickly.
But also the issue isn't necessarily that the pressure is coming to the right or the left. Instead, it's when the pressure's coming. When there is pressure, there's a difference between getting to the quarterback and and pressure is on the way. Because a lot of the time when you look at film, the reason that some of the plays, weren't going through the entirety of that play or weren't getting to that first read is because Purdy sensed pressure was coming, but rather than staying in the pocket, like Ted said, either stepping up or staying where he was and being able to make that throw, he flushed out. And so teams at the end of the season started to pick up on that. And so what they would do is run stunts with their defensive line or with their linebackers to where they flushed out a defender to that left side, understanding that Purdy had a tendency to roll out to the left early due to pressure coming, and that's where they would get to the quarterback because they'd have a guy in place far to that left side where Purdy would end up going. And so, it's things like that where he has to improve the pocket presence so that you don't have something susceptible in your game plan to where opponents can game plan against and then create unfavorable matchups against you to where it's really hard to stop in that case.
No doubt about it, especially because, like you said, we don't need to hit these guys. These guys don't need to necessarily hit their ceilings to be a Super Bowl contending team in 2022, but 2023 it might be very different. I mean, I would go out as far as to say that we were extremely healthy rolling into the 2022 playoffs, other than the quarterback position. And you could argue Purdy was our best quarterback. So if he stays healthy, that's a non-factor. And, it's basically Emmanuel Mosley. Like, I can't even think of another impact player we were missing for the playoffs. And Lenore played well in his stead. So, I mean, it's very easy for me to envision a situation where we need a lot more out of our QB in 2023, because at least injuries or even level of play, either could drop. I think both were kind of at a peak in 2022. But real quick, just want to say hi to Bryant Culp. He may have already left, said he couldn't stay, but he has a great channel. He just hit 100 subs. Everybody be sure and check him out. Give him a like and subscribe. Some watches. He and his wife do great stuff. She has some great all-female panels that she does, Tony Culp with an I, so check them out. Also, wanted to bring this one up. Jim Everett the Great was saying, if he survived the Steelers, and this is something that I've been talking about a little bit, like, do you think there's any advantage to maybe, I don't know, whichever quarterback you like or whatever, but like maybe letting Purdy or Lance start week 1 because you really want the other one to pop in week 2, because it's a very unfavorable matchup for us in Pittsburgh against the Steelers, who, like, we always start slow and they always start fast. I think they're 14-2 or 15-1 in their last 16 opening day games. And obviously their defense is very good. They got TJ Watt back. They got Highsmith on the other side. One of those guys, probably almost every down, will be going up against McKivitz, who will be making his first start at right tackle ever, and really one of his, maybe third start ever for us total. At tackle, I should say. He started at us at guard some in 2020, I believe. But ultimately, I wonder if there's like everybody's so worried about who's going to start week one, and I something in my mind kind of says maybe it's if you like the guy you like, maybe it's not so good that he starts week one because then everybody's going to be calling for their head week two, and that's what's always going to happen with two QBs that you think are both viable. Every loss, they're going to be like, put the other one in, put the other one in. I mean, not that you know credible people, but you know how Niners Twitter is, right?
And I mean, here's what I'll say. I don't really like the notion of having a guy week one with the intention of changing it in week two or week three. I
Right.
believe that
I'm
the
same.
guy who you have in week one is the guy who you should feel confident in going into the season. Now, I will say this with the preface. Well, two things. First of all, on the point about people calling for the quarterback's head after week one, I don't really think they care. I don't think Kyle Shanahan cares about the drama that could ensue in the media about if this quarterback's like not struggling and starting or if this other quarterback, the controversy that comes. I don't really think they care. But the other part that I'll say is I think this season is unlike most others under the Kyle Shanahan regime, and that I think this is the closest competition that they've had thus far. And so I question the precedents that Kyle Shanahan has set in sticking really with a quarterback throughout the entirety of the season, regardless of the faults. I think that if there are struggles for one of the starting quarterbacks, while I don't know if he'd pull him necessarily, I think there would be an increased tendency to at least consider a change, understanding that there's an urgency to go far this season with the potential tough decisions you have to make in the following offseason, maybe even surrounding your core skill players.
Yeah, there's going to be some changes, no doubt, down the road. So yeah, maybe if it's not 2023, maybe it's 2024 where we're going to need more out of the QB, and that's why I lean towards Lance, just because that idea of the higher ceiling, even if we don't know he'll reach it. I just want to see what we got with the guy. We invested all this draft capital in him, this time. I just want to see. I just don't want to see him go and hit that ceiling on another team. I feel like Kyle will never live it down, and he might not be very long tenured here after that, and us as fans will never hear the end of it. And that's sort of the bigger thing for me in these types of debates that we're seeing here in the chat per se and on Twitter on the timeline. Terradome had some interesting stuff. He said if arm strength is all you needed, Jeff George, Warren Moon, Dan Marino, whatever rings. How many they got? So like Jeff George, I get it. He's not a good quarterback, but Warren Moon and Dan Marino were outstanding quarterbacks. So like it wasn't the fact that they had a strong arm wasn't enough to win it. They didn't like for Marino, especially he didn't have a D and he didn't have a run game. So yeah, I mean, but and again, like I said earlier, not having a strong arm, you can still be great. It's just easier to be great if you have a strong arm. There's plenty of strong arm busts. It's not a guarantee of greatness. No one said that. It's not the most. It's an important thing, but it's not the most important thing. It's sort of the way I go on that. But what would you say to that, Rohan?
Yeah, I don't know. I see the frustration here with Terradome in some of his comments. To me, I'm not sided with either quarterback. Arm strength is one thing. I pointed out, though, a couple of other things that are needed where both quarterbacks could look to improve in. Both quarterbacks have pocket presence being one, improvisation being another. The biggest thing for me, I was on Ryan Hensley's show the other day, and we talked about the five most important skills for a quarterback, and accuracy was in there. Progressions, going through your
Timing.
progressions was in there for me. Timing, accuracy, going through your progressions. There's a lot to the quarterback part, and you talk about arm strength, and I think arm strength is more important in today's game than in the past. 100%. I just think that
Me
that's
too.
just the way that prospects are made nowadays, and that's altered the way that the game has been played. But I also think that there are a lot of important things at the quarterback position where that don't necessarily involve the arm talent or arm strength or however you call it. Like I said, with the accuracy, with timing, with improvisation, with pocket presence, with going through progressions, all of the different things. I think that there are a lot of individual factors that go into a quarterback, and it, I don't understand the frustration because if I'm being honest, as I've said a couple of times in the past, if you're talking about floor, right now Brock Purdy has the higher floor solely because he's
Absolutely.
played in more games.
Absolutely.
The whole point of the competition is to see if you can see a similar floor in the backup quarterback in Trey Lance or in Sam Darnold that can at least give you some confidence should Purdy be hurt, or if a scenario in which he struggles when he comes back, not in games but in practice, if he struggles, you have an option there in the waiting to where they could potentially take the starting job to begin the season and have a chance to compete. That's the way that it goes.
No doubt about it. Now, Terradome brings up another good point. He said, no one has more arm strength than Justin Herbert. Maybe not quite. I think Josh Allen maybe does, but they're in that mega cannon category. He said Brock's got two more playoff victories. Right. So,
I
wins
don't.
are a
I
team's
mean,
stat.
I don't really care. Yeah, like one
I mean,
team's
QB
better than the
wins,
other.
QB wins are they're not nothing, but they're not everything either. You have to take context and look at it. And Jack Hammer posted like Herbert's first, whatever 6 or 8 games versus Purdy's, and they're somewhat similar. I mean, Herbert had more yards, but Purdy had better interceptions to TD ratios and that kind of thing. It also doesn't show Herbert's mobility, but I basically I quote tweeted it and I said, "This is a cry for help," because I'm sorry, I'm not ready to compare Brock Purdy to Justin Herbert right now. I just feel like Herbert on our team would just destroy what any QB we've ever seen do here. Herbert didn't have the weapons we have. He didn't have Kyle. I don't think their O line was very good when Herbert was a rookie. And ultimately, he was supposed to kind of sit behind Tyrod Taylor, but the doctor punctured his lung when he got broken ribs. And he came in and did great, no doubt. One of the best rookie seasons ever, till Purdy. But I just think he had a lot less help than Purdy did. Do you agree with that, Rohan, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to say on this. Individually, Justin Herbert is a better quarterback.
That's all I was
I mean,
looking for.
and I don't like the comparisons like this. I think they're unnecessary because like I'm not trying to demean Brock Purdy by saying Justin Herbert's a better quarterback. In my opinion, he's a top 6, top 7 quarterback. And so, yeah, I think that you definitely have two arguments to it, and Purdy has done well in this kind of system, in this kind of system. So good for him. And again, what I said, I don't care who starts. I'm looking to just see who's the best quarterback for the 49ers in 2023.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And I think, a lot of people are saying, well, Darnold and Lance are competing, so that's a knock on Lance. And it's just like, I think Lance wants to compete. I think he wants to compete, improve. I don't think he has any hesitations. I think he believes in himself, and I think a lot of people believe in him. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I don't know about, um, uh, yeah. And anyway, let's see here. As far as yeah, I got lost in the chat. We're got a little bit behind, but yeah, I don't think it's fair to compare Purdy to Justin Herbert. Maybe if he continues to improve or whatever, or if he can prove that he can win with less than what we had last year, then I'm more open to that. Or if Herbert gets similar type of situation in on the Chargers and still falls short, then maybe. But so far with what they both had, I don't think it's easy to compare them, and I just don't think that Purdy is in that. Like you said, 6 or 7. I've got him maybe top 5, but we're close about where we see Herbert, and we both have Purdy outside the top 10. So not ready to compare them head to head, I suppose. As far as other stuff in the news, there's been obviously lots of stuff going on. Actually, I saw a poll today. Ryan Hensley did a poll where he was asking if we had to cut one player right now, would you cut CMC or would you cut Purdy? And I'd be curious to know what your thoughts on that would be, Rohan.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are a lot of things that go into factor. I will remove the financials out of it for now, just because I don't think that was the point of the poll. I'd remove the financials. It's more so importance to the team. And I've been pretty clear in saying that I believe Christian McCaffrey was the team's MVP in offensive MVP. Well, yeah, offensive MVP because of Nick Bosa, obviously, but offensive MVP in 2023, which is pretty damn tough. Understanding he came only midway through the season, but there was a significant change when Christian McCaffrey touched the field, and I think that especially in this offense, that's uncomparable. Mina Kimes earlier today gave a great statistical breakdown of the San Francisco offense pre and post Christian McCaffrey. Prior to McCaffrey's entrance in week 8, but really week 9, the 49ers offense ranked 21st in DVOA, 19th in EPA per play, 26th in QB rating, and 10th in yards per attempt. After CMC came to the team, they were first in offensive DVOA, first in EPA per play, second in QBR, and second in yards per attempt. That offense really took a huge step up once Christian McCaffrey joined the fold, and he impacts the game in more than just, him getting the ball. It's him freeing up other receivers more and more as well, just because, there's more attention towards him. And quarterbacks feel more comfortable with the offensive game plan when Christian McCaffrey's in the fold, understanding that if the pocket breaks down, if they can't get through all the progressions, or if there's not open receivers, you've got a guy who can take a check down a couple of yards down the field, maybe even 10 yards down the field, and really get a first down. So to me, that's the way that I look at it. I think Christian McCaffrey was the team's MVP last year. And I also think if you're looking at a cut, I think the drop off between Brock Purdy and Trey Lance and what it could be in this 49ers offense, I think that you can stomach that, understanding that Christian McCaffrey is still in the fold for the 49ers.
Yeah, CMC is an absolute difference maker. I mean, people want to say that we lost the Chiefs game when he got here, but like he had like a half a practice one day and like one walkthrough practice, not even a hitting practice. And he didn't really know the playbook. By the second half, we had run out of plays that he knew. We barely saw him in the second half. I know he had more touches than any other running back in the game, but he was not the starter. Elijah Mitchell started the game, and Elijah Mitchell had the most rushing yards in the game. And ultimately, no game that CMC started after that, the next 12 in a row that we won, 4 with Jimmy, 8 with Brock Purdy, CMC had a much bigger impact on all those games than he did against the Chiefs. And especially just look at the Rams game. The next week, he came in, he threw a TD, he caught a TD, he ran a TD in, the trifecta. It was such a great win over the Rams. In fact, I started TED Talks Ball the next week with Aaron Labigan. I had my first show that next Wednesday. And it was amazing because we had swept the Rams again. And more importantly, they were trying to get CMC too. They had made an offer pretty comparable to ours. I think we just had one more 4th round pick, and they tried to throw in Cam Akers or somebody instead of a 4th round pick. And so not only had we swooped them for CMC, but we had swept them for the 4th season in a row. And then they really fell apart after that. They didn't win. They won one more game while they were still in contention to make the playoffs in 2022, and only one more game after they were out of contention, and ended up 5-12 for the season. So they like to say they won the game that counted or that mattered the most. I'd say that one mattered quite a bit. Maybe not the most, but that was a pretty impactful winning of the trade for CMC and then winning of the game against the Rams that next week after the Chiefs. And then that started the win streak. So yeah, CMC is incredible. I'm just excited to hopefully see like CMC 2022, CMC in 23, and hopefully 2021 Debo in 23, and maybe some sort of vintage Kittle. I mean, I can only imagine if all of our weapons, and Ayuk seems to be progressing, it's just sort of an embarrassment of riches on offense and maybe just only getting better.
Yeah, can't wait to see what this offense is. And I think the 49ers are in a good spot. Deebo Samuel seems the most motivated he's been after, obviously, the contract extension last year. All the hoopla that came with that came out of shape. Didn't have a good 2022 according to his expectations. You can see it statistically. You can see it on the film. And I pointed out, the effort, especially when he wasn't getting the ball, wasn't really as high, but he seems motivated this year. He's talked about it, and I think that that's a good sign for the 49ers. I also said earlier this year that I think this is a critical offseason for almost every single 49ers skill position player. Brandon Ayuk's on his way to an extension. He wants the best season possible to get the most money possible. Deebo Samuel understands the 49ers might have to choose between him and Brandon Ayuk. He's motivated to stay on the team. He's motivated to see the remainder of his contract. He's probably motivated to stay in San Francisco too. And so I think that could, that motivation is there. George Kittle, the 49ers, he's the easiest guy to move off of next offseason. You designate him as a post June 1st cut or trade, you save 50% of the money that you can make, or that George Kittle is owed. He's owed about 19 million in a cap hit next year. You can save about 9 to 10 million on that contract next year should the 49ers need to do so. Same with Samuel. If you designate him as a post June 1st trade, it's a possibility, and the 49ers may have to make one of those tough moves, understanding where their cap situation will lie next offseason. So I think that, there are a couple of different um, implications in place for this 2023 season. And that could be, it's the best sign if we're seeing all the top players really competing at their highest level this year.
There you go. There you go. That's interesting. You say Kittle. He's my favorite player, Rohan. We can't trade Kittle. But that's my, emotional side, but my business side and rational side, we drafted two tight ends, didn't we? And we not drafted, but signed an undrafted player, Jack Coletto, who's probably more of a fullback. But if you play full, I don't know. That's maybe another option to take some tight end reps potentially. So interesting. Yeah, I hope we keep Kittle. But like you said, it's a business. It's a salary capped league. We're going to be paying Bosa. We're going to have to pay Ayuk. Can't keep everybody. Can't keep all these highest paid people at every position. One position that would make a lot of sense to me to replace would be Trent Williams, but how do you do that? How do you replace the best left tackle in football? One of the best that I can ever remember. His ability to run block and pass block, it's just incredible. Nobody is like that, top five in both. It's incredible. So Terradome was saying, so averaging 33.5 points per game doesn't matter. It absolutely matters, Terradome. Purdy did a great job with that, but there are some things to keep in mind. In that Alex Rollins video, there was some good statistics to keep in mind that the defense forced 1.2 turnovers per game with Jimmy G and 2.4 turnovers per game with Brock Purdy. So a turnover, 1.2 turnovers per game difference, that takes a chunk out of 7 points, probably at least 3 points out of it. And then I've been saying for a while that, Brock Purdy played some bad and banged up defenses. That's part of it too. The Cards defense that we played at the end of the season, it basically had J.J. Watt, Isaiah Simmons, and like the other safety not named Budda Baker were the only three starters from the beginning of the season, the regular starters. And Isaiah Simmons went down pretty early in that game. So that Cards D was a shell of itself. The Seattle defense was ranked 25th. We played them twice with Purdy. In the Bucs D that was top 10 at one point in the season, maybe at the end of the season as well. They were missing a ton of guys. Both starting safeties. Sean Murphy Bunting is a real good corner, and then Vita Vea went down really early in the game. He's one of the best defensive tackles in the game. If you're the 10th best defense, you lose all those guys, you're not top 10. You may not even be top 15 at that point. So, anyway, I really like Purdy, but I'm not going to sit here and just go off stats. You got to look at the context behind the stats as well too. Stats can be misleading without context. Yeah.
I'll say this. You're right, but I'm not going to take away anything from Brock Purdy for who he played. You play who you play. I'm not gonna sit here and I'm not gonna try and say he played this specific defense, so his stats were like this. I don't really break it down in terms of how I don't really break it down in terms of defense, because to me, when I look at film, it's, are you making the right reads? Because when you play easy defense or tough defense, regardless, you still got to make the right reads. And sometimes even when the maybe you threw for 60% compared to 80%. But even when you throw for 60% to compare to 80%, you might be still making the right reads, and that doesn't take away from you as a quarterback. And so I'm not gonna try and say this or that, but I've said it a couple of times. I mean, throughout the year, last year and this year, Purdy did a lot of things good. There are a couple of things to improve on, and the main thing I think that really where people got caught up is the storyline's amazing. Brock Purdy as a storyline is wonderful because you never see a seventh round pick doing what Brock Purdy did immediately, having the swagger and poise that he did. But as a pure NFL quarterback, I'm not going to say that he's a top 10 quarterback. I'm not going to say that. I just don't believe that based on the limited sample size that we've seen and things like that. Do I think he can be? Yeah, I think he can develop into it. And if he does, the 49ers have their franchise, not franchise, but a quarterback that they believe can win a Super Bowl. Context 100% matters. I agree with that. But I mean, I'm not going to sit here and try and, give, say it one way or another. You play who you play. I more so evaluate how that play essentially goes based on what game it is.
There you go. There you go. I like that. Yeah, you definitely can't control who you play, and every defense that he played was an NFL defense, and they know how to scheme against you. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's a huge thing. It's just when you're split, when you're getting down into the finer details, those are some things I look at. Real quick, just want to say hi to Beto from Niner Sickness Podcast. Everybody, make sure you give him a like and a subscribe. Check out some of his videos. Beto has these really cool overlays that are dynamic with like flames and all kinds of stuff. I'm very jealous. I might have to get a Mac to try and copy what he does. It's awesome work he's doing and great content too. He likes to joke. He has to do that to make up for his content, but he's being facetious. He has awesome content as well. And then also another creator in here, Just Fans Podcast. I think he's part of either the Let's Talk Sports that I simulcast to or the Hardcore Sports that I simulcast to. But thanks for joining. We appreciate everybody. Be sure to check out Just Fans. I think they're out of Houston. I think I saw today or recently. So if you're a Houston sports fan, check them out. And they probably do other towns as well too. So what else we got, Rohan? I know we're running short on time. You got another show at 6:30. Do you need some time to prep for that? I don't want to like run you right up to the last minute if you need to, you know,
Nah, I gotta
freshen
just
up
step
or
out for
grab a
something
water.
at 6:30. We got about, yeah, we can go for another 3-4 minutes. So you got a little bit of time.
Cool beans. I just never want to like, run you ragged or take it to the last possible second. But the chat's hopping and it's been great having you on. So I appreciate a few more minutes to bend your brain and get your opinions. What else has been going on in Ninerland? I saw you did a show today with John Chapman. You guys did an offensive draft. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and get some people some reasons to go back and rewatch?
Yeah, I mean, me and John, we kind of did this last year. We debuted it. Fans loved it, so we decided to bring it back. It's essentially an all offense draft. It's a snake draft that we do. The point of the exercise, you essentially draft an 11 man team of offensive players based on what the 49ers 2023 roster is like. The idea of it, you try to craft a team. So obviously there's a little fun in doing that, but also evaluating where the 49ers are strongest at in regards to depth. It's something that you can clearly see when you take these players. Obviously, 49ers pretty strong at running back right now in terms of depth. Another area that they're strong at, you could say, is quarterback and wide receiver. Some areas they're weaker at, tight end, offensive line in terms of depth. And so, the exercise kind of tells you what the state of the 49ers roster is. If you guys want, go back and check that out on my channel later on.
Would it be a spoiler to ask who like went number one, or you want to? I don't
Yeah,
want to spoil it or give people
no, I
not a
mean,
reason
I'm
not to
good.
go watch. Okay,
So I had the first pick. John had the second and third. I went with Trent Williams first. Just thought the drop off between him and the next tackle was just way too
massive.
high for me not to select him. John then went with, I believe he went with George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey, obviously, like I said, 49ers offensive MVP last year, and he was really the backbone of that offense for a good portion of time. And then he went with George Kittle, drop off at tight end, similar to the one at offensive tackle, I'd say, in that, it's a bit of a drop off afterwards. And so he went that. Go out and check the rest after that.
Cool beans. Thanks, Rohan. Terradome was talking about some of the good defenses that Purdy faced. And Purdy did face some good defenses. I didn't say that. I said they were mostly bad or banged up. So there were 12 defenses, and here we have three. And of those three, we'd already talked about Tampa Bay was banged up. And the Commanders, they're a good defense. They're only missing Cam Curl. He's not really a pass defender. He's a strong safety. He was their second leading tackler, and sometimes if you're weak against the run, it causes you to compensate, which will hurt your pass defense. But the problem that the Commanders had was they gave us the ball 4 times inside the 35. So I don't care what your defense is. If you do that, you're giving up like 12 to 28 points off of those possessions. So ultimately, there were some mitigating factors that made even the good defenses look not as good. And some of it was coaching. Riverboat Ron went for it on 4th down inside his 35. Riverboat Ron went for an onside kick when he should have kicked it away, in my opinion. I said it at the time, and of course it came true, that, if you trust your defense, if the defense is that good, then you kick it away, and you had over 2 minutes left to stop us and get the ball back. So anyway, I can tell you don't want to, Ash, we already said not to go over that, but we also are coming up on it here at 6:30. So I'll just say, Rohan, it's been a real pleasure having you on, as always. And thanks to everyone in the audience who came out. And I'll, you got anything coming up, Rohan, that you want to promote as far as shows today, tomorrow, early next week?
Nope, done for today. Tomorrow we will see. I'm not sure. Normally I go Monday through Thursday of the week. Next Monday, though, we'll likely be back with some content. And, it'll be another fun week. We going through some exercises. We did all offense with John Chapman this week. Likely next week we'll do an all defense type of thing. But Ted, I appreciate your time and appreciate the invite onto the show. And it was a fun one.
Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. And you're welcome back anytime, as you know. And we'll have to do it when there's some new stuff to talk about. So thanks again. Have a great day, great weekend. I'll say peace and go Niners.